A single dad sends a wrong text, and a powerful CEO replies. One mistake sparks a connection neither expected, pulling two different worlds into a love story that feels destined. Mark's days always began before the sun was fully awake, and by the time most people were brewing their first cup of coffee, he was already halfway through his morning routine. His daughter Emma was the center of his world, and every morning felt like a gentle race against the clock. Packing her lunch, finding the missing shoe she somehow always lost, brushing her hair into a neat ponytail only for her to giggle and mess it up again. After dropping her off at school, he drove to the auto shop where he worked as a mechanic, spending hours with grease-stained hands and the familiar smell of engine oil. Life was not luxurious, but Mark found meaning in the steady rhythm of providing for Emma, even if exhaustion clung to him like a quiet shadow. That particular evening, after a long shift and a chaotic grocery run, he was in the kitchen stirring pasta, trying to help Emma finish her cardboard solar system for school. The kitchen was warm and messy in the way homes with children often are, crayons rolling near the sink, glitter stuck to the tiles, and two pots competing for space on the stove. While wiping sauce off Emma's cheek, he grabbed his phone to text the babysitter for help the next morning. He typed quickly, "Can you come tomorrow at 7? I really need you early," and hit send without checking the number. He set the phone down and went back to Emma's Jupiter model, not realizing the message had traveled to someone entirely unexpected. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed. He reached for it absent-mindedly, expecting a confirmation, but instead found a message that read, "I'm sorry, but I think you sent this to the wrong person." Mark blinked, confused for a second, then let out a tired laugh. He typed back, "Oh, sorry about that. Long day." He assumed that was the end of it, but something about the polite reply stuck with him for a brief moment. He didn't know who the stranger was, didn't know that the tone behind those words belonged to someone whose life looked nothing like his, someone who ran a company, someone he would soon come to know far better than he expected. As the pasta boiled over and Emma squealed about losing her glitter again, Mark brushed off the odd feeling in his chest. He finished dinner, helped Emma glue planets, tucked her into bed, then sank onto the couch with a sigh, unaware that a tiny accident had already shifted the direction of his life. He plugged his phone in to charge, the wrong number conversation already slipping from his mind. He thought tomorrow would be like every other day. A school run, a long shift, dinner, bedtime. He didn't yet know that a woman he had never met was thinking about the strange message she'd received from an unknown number, and that by morning, her curiosity would lead her right back to him. Mark didn't expect to hear from the unknown woman again, but the next morning, as he stood outside Emma's school gate sipping lukewarm coffee from a metal thermos, his phone buzzed with a new message. He glanced at the screen and saw her number, still unsaved, followed by a simple line, "I hope today starts better than yesterday." The words made him pause, caught somewhere between surprise and an unexpected warmth that nudged the corners of his mouth into a smile. He typed back, "So far no pasta boiling over, so that's a win," adding a small smile without meaning to. She responded almost immediately, joking about how she also had mornings where everything fell apart before 9 a.m. The exchange slipped into a soft, pleasant back and forth until Emma ran off. Mark didn't expect to hear from the unknown woman again, but the next morning, as he stood outside Emma's school gate sipping lukewarm coffee from a metal thermos, his phone buzzed with a new message. He glanced at the screen and saw her number, still unsaved, followed by a simple line, "I hope today starts better than yesterday." The words made him pause, caught somewhere between surprise and an unexpected warmth that nudged the corners of his mouth into a smile. He typed back, "So far, no pasta boiling over, so that's a win," adding a small smile without meaning to. She responded almost immediately, joking about how she also had mornings where everything fell apart before 9 a.m. The exchange slipped into a soft, pleasant back and forth until Emma ran off toward her classroom and Mark had to leave for work. But even as he tightened bolts and checked engines at the shop, he found himself glancing at his phone more often than usual. Their conversation didn't stop. It continued in pockets throughout the day, during his lunch break, while he waited for a customer to approve a repair, even after he got home and reheated leftovers for dinner. She told him her name was Elena, and although she didn't reveal much about her job at first, he noticed hints of stress in her words. Talk of long meetings, tough decisions, and team members who looked to her for answers she didn't always have. Mark opened up in return. He told her about Emma, about how she loved space projects, about how raising her alone was both the hardest and best part of his life. He wasn't the type to overshare with strangers, but with Elena, the words flowed easily. It felt different from anything he had experienced before, like each message peeled back another quiet layer of understanding between them. Late that night, after Emma had fallen asleep with paint still on her fingers, Mark sat on the couch and finally asked, "So what do you do exactly? You sound like someone who carries a lot." There was a moment of pause before her reply came. "I run a tech company," she wrote. "A CEO, technically, but the title feels heavier than it looks." Mark stared at the words, surprised, but strangely not intimidated. He imagined what her world must look like: sleek offices, important meetings, people depending on her for answers she didn't always have. He felt the distance between their lives more clearly, yet the conversation didn't feel distant at all. He typed back honestly, "That sounds intense. Meanwhile, I'm over here just trying to keep my daughter from gluing herself to her homework." She sent a laughing emoji, then said, "Maybe your world is kinder than mine." They kept talking until Mark realized nearly an hour had passed, and he hadn't felt this light in a long time. When he finally put the phone down and lay back against the couch, he found himself replaying her messages, her humor, her sincerity, the tiny glimpses of vulnerability she trusted him with. He didn't know where this unexpected thread of connection was leading, but for the first time in a long while, he was curious to find out. Mark wasn't sure when texting Elena had stopped feeling like a casual distraction and turned into something he looked forward to, but by the end of the week, their conversations had carved out a comfortable space in his daily routine. It felt natural, almost inevitable, when one night, after a long stretch of easy back and forth, she wrote, "Maybe we should talk in person sometime." The message took him by surprise, and for a moment he simply stared at it, his heart thumping a little faster than he expected. He typed back, "I'd like that," before he could overthink it. They settled on a small, quiet cafe downtown, a place neutral enough that neither world would overshadow the other. On the day they agreed to meet, Mark woke up earlier than usual, nerves buzzing beneath his skin as he dropped Emma at school and tried not to overthink every choice from his shirt to his shoes. By the time he parked outside the cafe, he felt more anxious than he had on any first day at any job. He walked in, took a seat by the window, and tried to calm his breathing. When Elena stepped through the door a few minutes later, he recognized her instantly, even though he had never seen her in person before. She wore a soft cream blouse, fitted black slacks, and a simple necklace that caught the morning light just right. Her brown hair was tucked neatly behind one ear, and she looked slightly nervous, which somehow eased Mark's tension. When their eyes met, she smiled warmly, and the room seemed to shift into focus. "Mark?" she asked, her voice gentler and softer than he imagined. "That's me," he managed, returning her smile. They ordered coffee and sat down, and though Mark had prepared for awkward silence, none arrived. Their conversation flowed almost effortlessly. She teased him about his glitter-covered kitchen. He joked about her CEO life, sounding like a superhero origin story. She talked about her job with a mix of pride and weariness, admitting how isolating leadership could be. Mark listened, genuinely curious in a way most people around her rarely were. When he spoke about raising Emma, about the joy, the fears, the quiet exhaustion, Elena listened just as attentively, her expression softening in understanding. He noticed how her polished appearance faded into something real and human as she smiled, sighed, or tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. There were moments when she looked at him as if she saw something grounding, something refreshing, and he felt it too, this sense that they came from different worlds but somehow understood each other better than many people in their own circles. They stayed longer than either of them expected. By the time they stepped outside, the late afternoon sun had shifted into a warm gold. They stood near the door for a moment, neither wanting to walk away too quickly. "I'm glad we did this," Elena said, her voice soft but certain. "Me too," Mark replied, feeling something inside him settle into a place that felt both new and strangely right. The days that followed their first meeting carried a new weight, a soft warmth that clung to Mark in moments he didn't expect. When he packed Emma's lunch, when he wiped grease off his hands at work, or when he found himself checking his phone at night just to reread a message from Elena. But with that warmth came an undercurrent of fear he couldn't shake. He liked her, more than he'd intended, more than he felt he had the right to. And every time she talked about late meetings, investor presentations, or the pressure of running a company, he felt the gap between their worlds widen. That gap became painfully clear the first time Elena visited his apartment. She arrived holding a small pastry box, dressed in a simple blouse and slacks, her hair pulled back in a neat twist that made her look effortlessly elegant. Mark opened the door with a nervous smile, suddenly hyper-aware of the chipped paint on the walls and the small living room filled with Emma's drawings taped in uneven lines. Emma peeked shyly from behind Mark's leg, her ponytail slightly crooked from her afternoon nap. Elena knelt down, meeting her at eye level, and said softly, "Hi, Emma, I brought something sweet for you." It was a simple gesture, but Emma hesitated, clutching Mark's hand, before finally offering a tiny, cautious smile. As they stepped inside, Mark apologized for the mess more times than necessary. Elena only smiled and said, "It feels like a home. Don't apologize for that." Still, he saw the contrast, her world of glass offices and polished floors versus his cozy, cluttered apartment that echoed with the sounds of children. The tension wasn't dramatic or spoken, but it lingered in the air like a quiet question neither could fully answer. Meanwhile, Elena had her own battles. At work, her assistant raised a brow when she rescheduled a board dinner. A colleague joked, "Special plans tonight?" with a tone that wasn't entirely friendly. Elena brushed it off, but the whispers followed her through hallways lit by cold fluorescent lights. She wasn't ashamed of Mark, far from it, but she knew her world wasn't kind to people who didn't fit its polished mold. That evening, after Emma finally warmed up enough to show Elena her painted planets and glitter-covered sketches, the three of them shared a simple dinner at the small kitchen table. Elena listened attentively as Emma told her the story of her school project, and Mark watched the two of them with a warmth he tried hard to hide. But later, when Emma went to her room and the apartment quieted down, Mark found himself staring at his hands, unsure how to voice the worry in his chest. Elena noticed immediately. "You're thinking too loudly," she said with a gentle smile. Mark sighed. I don't know if this fits your life." Elena reached for his hand without hesitation. "Mark, I don't want a perfect life. I want a real one." His breath caught at the honesty in her voice. The moment stretched quietly between them, soft but heavy. And though the doubts didn't disappear entirely, something stronger settled in their place. A willingness to try, despite the differences, despite the judgment, despite the fear that neither of them fully knew how to navigate this. They weren't perfect, but they were real, and for both of them, that was worth holding on to. In the weeks that followed, Something gentle and steady began to take shape between Mark, Emma, and Elena, something that didn't need big declarations to feel real. It started with Elena stopping by on weekends, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with nothing but a tired smile and the hope of a quiet breakfast together. Mark would brew coffee, while Emma climbed onto a chair beside Elena, asking endless questions about what CEOs do. Questions that made Elena laugh in a way Mark had never heard at work. One Sunday morning, Elena insisted on making pancakes, claiming she had once seen a recipe video and watched it twice, so that counts as training. She burned the first batch and undercooked the second, prompting Emma to scrape off the good parts with the seriousness of a tiny chef. Mark leaned against the counter, watching the two of them laugh in the sunlit kitchen, and felt something warm settle inside him, something that looked dangerously close to happiness. Over time, Elena became part of their routines without either of them announcing it. She joined them for grocery runs, pushing the cart while Emma tossed cereal boxes into it with dramatic flair. She visited for Friday movie nights, often falling asleep halfway through with her head resting on Mark's shoulder as Emma curled up on the other side. She helped Emma with her homework even when she had no idea how to solve first-grade math, but pretended she did, just to make Emma giggle. And Mark, in return, started to see parts of Elena that no one else saw. The woman who held him entire company on her shoulders came undone softly in his presence, letting her hair fall loose, admitting when she was scared of making the wrong call, confessing that she sometimes felt lonely in a room full of people who admired her but didn't really know her. Mark didn't offer grand advice. He simply listened, grounding her in a way she didn't know she needed. One evening, after picking up Emma from school, Mark found Elena waiting outside his apartment building with a bouquet of small sunflowers, Emma's favorite. She knelt down as Emma ran to her, wrapping her arms around Elena's waist like she had belonged there all along. Later that night, as Emma proudly placed the flowers in a vase, Elena whispered to Mark, "I've never felt this anchored before." Mark didn't reply, but the look in his eyes said everything. Their worlds didn't just intersect, they were blending, quietly and naturally. Emma asked about Elena more often, drawing pictures of Mark, me, and Lena holding hands. And Elena began rearranging her schedule, carving out time that she used to fill with meetings and obligations. This wasn't a whirlwind romance, nor was it a fragile one. It grew in small, meaningful moments, a shared laugh, a hand held in the kitchen, the soft silence of three people fitting together on a couch. Mark didn't know where it was headed yet, but he could feel the possibility of a future forming, something he hadn't dared to imagine in a long time. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was raising Emma alone. He felt like something bigger, something resembling a family, was slowly, beautifully taking shape. The night everything finally became clear arrived quietly, without any grand gesture or dramatic confession, just the soft hum of the heater, the warm glow of the living room lamp, and the comfortable silence that had slowly become the rhythm of Mark and Elena's evenings together. It was late November, the kind of chilly night that made the windows fog slightly at the corners, and Mark had made a simple dinner that somehow tasted better just because Elena and Emma were there to share it. After cleaning up, they all settled on the couch to watch Emma's favorite animated movie. Halfway through, Emma's eyelids drooped, her small body leaning into Elena's side, until she finally fell asleep with her head on Elena's lap, breathing softly and holding on to the hem of her blouse. Mark watched from the other end of the couch, his heart tightening at the sight. Elena gently brushing Emma's hair away from her forehead, her expression soft and full of care in a way he had never seen her show anyone else. He realized then that this wasn't temporary for her. She wasn't here out of curiosity or novelty. She was here because she wanted to be part of their world. When the movie ended, Mark carried Emma to her room, tucking her under her blanket with the practiced tenderness of a parent who knew every little habit she had. He walked back to the living room, and there was Elena, still sitting on the couch, knees pulled close, her eyes tracking him the moment he stepped in. Something quiet and emotional glimmered there, something he had felt building but hadn't dared to name. She exhaled softly and said, "I've been thinking. Ever since you texted me by accident, my life hasn't felt the same." She gave a small, nervous smile, the kind that only showed up when she let herself be vulnerable. "I didn't know I could feel this way again." Mark sat beside her, the warm light casting gentle shadows on the wall behind them. "I didn't either," he admitted, his voice low, honest. "That night, it was a mistake, but maybe it wasn't." Elena turned toward him fully now, her eyes warmer than he'd ever seen them. "It didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like something meant for me." Mark reached out, sliding his hand into hers, and she squeezed gently, her thumb brushing over his skin as if memorizing the shape of him. They sat there for a long moment, neither speaking, letting the truth settle between them. Mark thought of the years he had spent believing love was something he no longer had room for, something reserved for people whose lives hadn't cracked apart. He thought of raising Emma alone, nights spent wondering if he'd ever have someone to share the weight with. And then he thought of Elena, elegant, brilliant, imperfect in the sweetest ways, who had walked into their lives because of one tired message sent to the wrong number. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. "I want this, Lena, not just for now, for real." Her breath caught, a soft smile forming as she leaned her forehead against his. "Me too," she whispered. Outside the night was still and quiet, but inside the small apartment a future had begun to form. Soft, certain, and meant to be. And as they held on to each other in the warm glow of the room, both of them knew that one small accident had rewritten their lives into something that felt like home. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you follow Drew Daily Stories for more heartfelt twists, single dad journeys, billionaire romances, and emotional tales that keep you hooked. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more stories to life every day.